Madam President. I want to start by quoting an excerpt from a book put together by the students of St Joseph's Catholic Primary School in Eugowra as part of their ongoing flood recovery efforts. They screamed in horror as the wave of water, larger than their houses, surrounded them. People scrambled to find safety. They watched helplessly as everything was washed around as if it was tumbling in a washing machine. That's from a primary school kid named Pippa. And it sets a scene for what we're discussing here today. 2 years ago, a flood event swept through the Central West, impacting homes, businesses, infrastructure in towns such as Molong, Cudal, Canowindra and Manildra. And Eugowra in particular was badly affected when a tidal wave of water swept through that town, impacting 80 to 90% of the homes, many of which were destroyed, as we heard from Pippa, in icy mud. During this event, residents of the towns helped to rescue their own neighbours, putting their own lives at risk. People spent hours clinging to rooftops, not knowing if their friends and family were alive, watching the biggest helicopter evacuation in Australia to date. However, all the material losses fade into insignificance compared to the tragic loss of two much-loved Eugowra residents. In the days following this flood, we saw an outpouring of support for these communities. Residents of surrounding communities arrived en masse with shovels, brooms, trucks and other cleaning equipment. Builders took days away from their scheduled work to assist in the recovery. Community groups cooked barbecues and provided meals for those affected. And these were just some of the many ways in which the local community helped following this devastation. People chipped in to do whatever was needed. A couple of days after this event, I visited Eugowra and Molong and Cudal, along with the then Premier, Dominic Perrottet, and Emergency Services Minister, Steph Cook. The scene that we walked into in Eugowra was unlike any that I had seen before. The closest I could compare it to would be a war scene from a Hollywood movie. There were choppers in the air, quad bikes driving through mud-filled streets, piles of debris and destroyed homes shifted from their foundations. But strangely and funnily enough, I actually felt better after visiting the town than I did beforehand. And I say that referring to conversations that I had while in Eugowra, which showed me the resilience and determination of these residents and convinced me that they would be okay, that these towns would recover. And we see that evidence today, 2 years on. I've been in Eugowra, Cudal and Molong recently, and these towns are recovering. And it's testament to the resilience and the dedication of the people who live in these towns. But a common theme from talking to them is that this resilience has a limit. Many remarked that if this happened again, and we're not talking about a major flood of that scale, but another decent flood, the resources aren't there financially and emotionally to rebuild once again. So we need a greater emphasis and more activity on mitigation measures in these areas. In Molong, for instance, there are drainage issues under the CBD. There's talk of a levee bank, and I know the council has done some work on flood plans. The creek needs some clean-up work done, and the government needs to help by removing some of the green and red tape to allow this to happen. But we do need the support and ultimately the checkbook of the government to see these mitigation steps put into fruition. It's a similar story in Cudal, where some simple common sense upgrades to drainage and guttering could put residents' minds at ease. And they could use some support for their first responders in that community as well. Businesses could use some more help, purely from a resilience perspective, to put things up like flood-proof shutters and install concrete flooring. These things cost money, so we'd ask the government to help, to mirror funding they've given to the Northern Rivers to support businesses in the Central West. The Resilient Homes program, while welcome, is not enough. Residents and communities have been teased with suggestions of more money coming, but this isn't that helpful. We need certainty around this, and we need that money now so people can make informed decisions about the future of these communities. As we mark 2 years now since the disaster, let's never forget what these communities went through, the impact this had on their lives, emotionally and financially. And let's use this motion to commit as a parliament to make sure we are always there to aid the ongoing recovery of these wonderful communities.
Thank you. Minister. rise on behalf of the government to indicate our support for this motion, and I thank the member for bringing it forward. It is particularly appropriate that the Parliament acknowledge and commemorate the flood event that did occur in this community in November 2022 across this part of the Central West, and it's been 2 years since this catastrophic event when flooding caused extensive damage to crops, roads, businesses and primary production. Official flood level reached 11.2 metres, and this is 2.2 metres above the major flood level of 9 metres and exceeded the previous record of 10.01 metres recorded in 1950. More than 200 SES and interagency personnel responded quickly with 12 helicopters in action over a 6-hour period. And in just one day, the RFS assisted with 67 rescues. We remember that the community of Eugowra pulled together and assisted their neighbours to evacuate, with more than 700 residents being evacuated who sought shelter in the surrounding areas of Orange and Parks. And sadly, we remember the 2 residents who lost their lives. The New South Wales Reconstruction Authority has been on the ground working with councils and local community leaders on all aspects of recovery planning and program delivery, and with the support of councils and the community, the Reconstruction Authority is providing direct support to highly impacted residents across that community. Key to Eugowra's recovery has been the high level of volunteering from local community members, including local and non-local organisations, and recovery efforts in the Central West are being boosted under the joint Australian and state government $100 million Central West Recovery and Resilience Package. This package will support repair and replacement of community assets, the resilience of roads and bridges, provision of legal assistance services, building the resilience of the community to future disasters by targeting the resilient housing program to locations and households where risk to life and safety issues are the greatest. The Eugowra flooding, and by extension the devastating flooding effects in the Northern Rivers, is a reminder to everyone that we must be prepared, and this community deserves to maintain the full attention of our government. I did speak on this yesterday, I think, in another part, the debate in the House, and I visited the community early last year, I think it was, and it was a privilege to be able to meet with some of the people who were impacted, who told me the stories of how they got through the situation, showed me some of the damage, and I indicated yesterday that stayed with me, and that's true, and so the people of these communities should know that they still have the support of the government.
The Honourable Sarah Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr Assistant President. I rise to contribute to the debate on this motion, and I just want to thank the Honourable Scott Barrett for moving it. It is important that we continue to acknowledge and reflect on the magnitude of the flooding event in the Central West 2 years ago. And I just want to say, because he won't, because he's very humble, for Scott to come in and move a motion like this is not talking about something that you've just seen on TV for people that you don't know. Scott is very much a part of this community in the Central West, and I know he was on the ground very quickly thereafter following the catastrophic flooding event, and these are people that I know he has known and played sport with and worked with, and I know he feels it very deeply. I was there not long after the event, and I'll talk about it in a minute, but the flooding event, and I was at Eugowra Public School and chatting to the principal there, Carmel Doyle, and she said, "Oh no, I know Scott Barrett and his wife," and had lovely things to say about both Scott and Mez, and I think that's the point here, that this is something that I know the member feels very strongly about, making sure that this community is supported, because these are real people who deserve to have every effort given and support given to them from government as they rebuild their lives. I just want to acknowledge particularly the education and early childhood community in Eugowra in my contribution. Obviously, I was the Minister for both education and early childhood when the flooding event occurred, and I was there very quickly thereafter and meeting with Raywin Malloy, who runs the Community Children's Centre, and what we were able to do was go and have a look at the level of devastation in the old building and what that had done to completely wipe out that service for that community. Fortunately is not the word to use, but because we had been through the Lismore and Northern Rivers flooding events not that long before, we had processes in place to get these early childhood services up and running quite quickly, and we were able to re-establish that service on the grounds of the public school. The local Catholic school was also there in Eugowra, and I just want to acknowledge those principals, those parents and those families that made it possible to get that childcare centre up and running again literally within days, because that really mattered. It mattered for healing, it mattered for people to be able to be back together and see each other, parents trying to deal with clean-up, trying to work out what they were going to be doing with their lives in terms of where they were going to live and what they were going to do, to know that their children could be in a safe place, being well looked after by educators who know them and who want the best for them, was actually really powerful and really important. And I was very grateful to be able to use my position as Minister at the time to help them to do that. Last year I was able to attend the 1 year anniversary with Sam Faraway that the Eugowra community put on as well, and these issues are still raw. Trauma takes time to heal from, and it takes time to rebuild communities, but I have no doubt that these people in the Central West will be able to do it better than anyone because of how incredible they are, how much they work together, and I know we use resilience a lot as a bit of a buzzword, but I have to say I've never seen a community come together more, and I know that if anyone can get through this, it will be the people of the Central West.
Ms Sue Higginson.
Mr Assistant President, I rise also to contribute to the discussion on this motion. It's really interesting, and I note the comments of the former speaker. I did watch people on the TV that morning, and I recall seeing people on the TV the following morning. And there was a moment, and I remember literally grabbing my own belly and bawling my eyes out, because it was literally a few months on from the Lismore floods. And it was actually, that moment of realising, oh my gosh, we know exactly what this looks like, what it means and how it feels. And it is so traumatising, and it is so deep when you are literally watching people in the midst and throes of such a catastrophe who have lost everything. The flooding was directly responsible for the deaths of 2 members of the community, similar to what happened to my community only a few months earlier. And the reality is, we know that these floods occurred just those few months after. The reality of what we saw and what we have seen is the climatic drivers of the La Niña in 2022 were 2 years of back-to-back events, near record surface and sea surface temperatures. We know that they have increased by an average of 1.08 degrees since 1900. Heavy short-term rainfall events are becoming more intense, and they will become more frequent. And in the future, more intense, short-duration, heavy rainfall events, even in regions where average rainfall decreases or stays the same. This is the reality of climate change. Yesterday, we tabled the Planning and Climate Inquiry Portfolio Committee number 7 report that was looking at the planning system and its intersection with climate change. We made some serious recommendations about what the New South Wales government could do, particularly by supporting local councils to be able to better support their communities. I believe, and I know the committee found, these are fundamental steps, because the reality is these events are not going to go away. Communities across the whole country are going to experience these catastrophic events. We know that this is actually what climate change looks like. We know that we will see more intense events. And all governments can and must do better when it comes to the preparation for and the response to climate-induced disasters. Yes, we've learnt a lot, but the reality is, and what we all know, is no 2 events are the same. And what we do know is that they are likely to get worse. So our preparation, whilst it's important to look back at what's happened, it's really important to look forward and to be better prepared.
Further speakers. The Honourable Wes Fang.
Thank you, Mr Assistant President. I rise to make a contribution on this debate, and I do so wanting to support my good friend and colleague in bringing this motion, because I know that for particularly the Eugowra community, he played such a vital role in assisting the community, listening to the community, and helping that community through some particularly dark times. And I want to pay tribute to the work that he did on the ground And I know that at the time when, after the floods, we were in constant contact, making sure that not only was the community okay, but that Scott was also being taken care of. And, we spoke to him about the things that were happening on the ground. And I recall one thing in particular was that, he was there sorting through the remnants of what had been left at the post office, trying as best he could to make sure that even the mail that had been, damaged by the floodwaters was, being sorted out from the rest of the remnants of the rest of the shop and the post office, because it had just taken everything. And so that imagery that I had of the flood, having spoken to Scott, I think will always stick with me. And that's something that I think is particularly important, that we recognise that that community has been devastated by what's occurred on the ground. But I also think that every cloud has a silver lining, and there's no doubt that when bad things happen to the community, our communities in rural and regional New South Wales absolutely shine. And we know that other communities in the surrounds rose up to support that community of Eugowra. I recall that we went to the Royal Easter Show and a fundraising lunch or brunch that was held there, and there was no question that the Eugowra community spoke so fondly of people like Scott, and actually my other colleague here in this place, Sarah Mitchell, for the immediacy that they turned up on the ground to make sure that things such as education and support were there. And I think that their efforts helped to bring people through what was a particularly dark time. And I think that whilst I note the contribution of the previous speaker about the contribution of other issues, at the immediacy of the matter, things need to be recognised for what they are, a disaster, and it gives the opportunity for people to rise up.
Any further speakers? The Honourable Scott Barrett in reply.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. Look, thank you so very much, everyone that contributed to that. The Minister, thank you for your words. Sarah Mitchell, your words are very kind and touching, and I know for you yourself, I know the community of Eugowra in particular is very appreciative of some of the work you did out there, particularly in relation to the preschool and the moving of that. It was a very touching moment out there because the Catholic school was badly flooded. The two schools, the Catholic school and the public school, spent some time co-located, and I know that was a great experience for the kids out there. Ms Sue Higginson, thank you. I know you can certainly empathise with what these communities went through with what you've done, and I've certainly seen your passion for this through the committee that we were jointly on into the response to those floods up in your part of the world. And Honourable Wes Fang, thank you for your kind and embarrassing words. What we did up there, my wife and I just jumped into the community, as others did from throughout the Central West, to do whatever jobs were needed, odd jobs that you wouldn't even think of, like sorting out old mail, that just needed to be done. With the support package that has been mentioned, the $100 million, it was welcomed, but a couple of things to note on that. One, this has been announced a long time ago, but we're actually yet to see any money in the community. So it'd be great if we could see that hurry up, but I'll say again, that money is not going to meet the demand of those communities that it covers, and that includes communities in Forbes, Parks, and also Condobolin. So we need to get more money of that rolled out as quickly as we can. Look, it's great to see nice words from the government on this one, and we thank them for that, but I guarantee you the people of the Central West will swap that pretty quickly if they can dust off the checkbooks and start putting some more money into that community. It is one of those things where I think whatever we do give this community would not be enough to help them recover. They've been through an awful lot. and we need to help them do more. And we can do that as well. There's a few big events coming out. If you go out to these towns, they are recovering and they look great. I was in Eugowra the other day, the flags were flying, the sun was out, the shops are open, so get back out into these towns. Molong has their Christmas shopping night on the 6th of December. I've been to that event before. It's a fantastic street party in the town to do some shopping and meet some great people. More broadly, let's do more for preparation and mitigation for these events. There's things that can be done and we need to be ready. There are going to be more floods. We need to be ready for them, and that includes support for our first responders. And one of the positives, I guess, that's come out of that is an increase of activity around the first responders in places like Cudal. And then let's look at these events. We need to look forward. One of the catchphrases at the moment and for the last few years has been community-led responses. Well, let's look at the Eugowra Progress Association, the Bowling Club at Cudal, the Rebuild Molong movement on how to properly do community-led response. I thank very much all those people that were involved in that response and say to the people, flood-affected people of the Central West, we will not let you be forgotten.
The Honourable Scott Barrett.